I was a test subject for a medical experiment, and I'm still experiencing side effects. Dude, why don't you try doing some medical testing? Some of those gigs pay pretty well, my best friend Harold suggested one day. I had just finished complaining about how much my latest car repairs were going to cost. Being the guy who always holds the flashlight and hands over tools, but never actually touches the car, had finally caught up with me. The shop currently working on my Honda was charging me $800. Don't you have to be, healthy to do that? I asked while scrolling through Craigslist ads, hoping to find someone desperate enough to post a quick cash gig. I was nearly at the point of writing a high school kid's English paper for $20. Nah, man, they have tests for everything, some for smokers. Harold coughed after hitting the joint we were passing back and forth. Some for non-smokers, gym rats, couch potatoes, you name it, they're testing it. After another coughing fit, he handed me the rapidly burning joint. And they don't drug test or anything? I asked. Some do, but if you meet the right criteria, some of them pay big bucks, he said as I took a hit. I coughed hard. This was some seriously strong stuff. And how are you suddenly such an expert on medical testing? He grinned. How do you think I've been able to buy this dank weed lately? He had a point. Harold was always the guy who bought the cheapest stuff he could find, but lately his taste had clearly improved. Come to think of it, he hadn't complained about being broke in weeks. Since senior year of high school, he always needed help. Concert tickets, weed, his water bill, anything over $20, and he was asking for help. But not now. He even bought the weed we were smoking himself. And judging by how high I was, it was some seriously good stuff. I figured, what the hell? There were worse things I could do for money. Harold drove me down to a plain-looking medical building on the edge of the city center. We parked in the attached 3-story concrete garage. You sure I'll find something? I asked. Without the buzz from last night calming me down, I was starting to worry. If I didn't get my car fixed soon, the pizza place I delivered for might replace me. No worries, man. They've got all kinds of stuff going on in there. Plus, I get a bonus if someone I refer gets picked. He flashed a big grin at me. If there was one thing in this world I could trust, it was Harold doing anything to keep his weed stash going strong. If you say so, I muttered. We both stepped out of the car, took the elevator down to the first floor, and walked into the cream-colored building. The inside was way more impressive than the outside. The lobby opened up into a sleek, bright space with a glossy white floor, plenty of open area, and a cozy seating section with 8 comfy-looking chairs by the receptionist's desk. A young woman sat behind the desk, speaking into a headset mic in a calm, professional voice. Harold walked right up to the desk and grinned at her. Before he could say anything, she lifted a finger in the classic just one moment gesture, eyes still locked on her computer screen. Of course, Dr. Brown. I'll notify them right away, she said, then looked up. Sorry about that. How can I help? Oh, hi, Harold. Hey, Steph, she sighed. Harold, I've already told you twice. I'm not interested. Harold cut her off with a hand up. I swear, I'm not here to ask you out again. I'm bringing in a referral this time. He pointed his thumb back toward me. I gave a little wave and tried to look friendly. I could definitely see why Harold had tried to shoot his shot. Steph was seriously cute. Her frown softened into a faint smile. Of course. Can I get your name, please? I stepped up to the desk. Richard Pinsky. She began typing. All right, I'm going to print out a few forms for you to fill out, she said, reaching below the desk. I caught Harold sneak a peek at the quick flash of her cleavage as she bent down, totally busted. She came back up with a clipboard and a small stack of papers. Here you go, Richard. Harold, why don't you go sit with him and help him fill them out? She said pointedly, her expression showing just how done she was with Harold's previous attempts at flirting. She clipped the pages to the board and gave us a polite but firm gesture toward the seating area. We sat down and I glanced at the first few pages. Pretty standard stuff for a doctor's office. Weight, age, a list of good and bad habits. Allergies? None. Medications? None. And then came the part I always dreaded on any doctor's form: family history. It was always a weird and uncomfortable section. I hadn't been diagnosed with anything myself, but with my genetics, there was always a lingering sense of doom. Half of my mom's side had either schizophrenia or depression, and my dad's side was basically a walking billboard for cancer and diabetes. I didn't even talk to Harold about that stuff, especially not the schizophrenia. That one always sat in the back of my mind like a shadow. I stared at the list for a moment, then finally started checking boxes under family history. I really needed this money. I needed to get my car fixed, get back to delivering pizzas, and hopefully avoid getting replaced. Rent wasn't going to pay itself. With a sigh, I marked down diabetes and a handful of different cancers that had affected various members of my extended family. But I left the boxes for depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia blank. "No need to worry, man," Harold said, leaning over in his chair and peeking at the clipboard. "Cancer and diabetes are pretty common. I'm sure it won't mess up your chances too much." "You're making this weird, man," I said, giving him a side eye. "I'm already having a hard time filling this crap out. Try not to look so excited about that referral bonus, would you?" All right, just trying to help," he mumbled, leaning back and pulling out his phone. I flipped to the next page and immediately regretted it. It was just a couple of massive blocks of fine print, the kind where the letters seem to blend together the longer you stare. The title at the top was the only thing easy to read: Medical Authorization Agreement. "Hey, Harold?" He didn't even look up. "Thought you didn't want my help, man. Cut the smart-ass act and tell me what the hell this is." He glanced at the page, barely taking half a second before chuckling. "Oh, That's just the usual consent stuff. Basically says they can run medical exams, take blood, the usual deal. Just legal mumbo-jumbo." That tracked. I scrolled down with my eyes, found the part with my name pre-printed, and signed and dated it like I was told. Next page, same story. Dense, tiny text I could barely read, but this one had non-disclosure agreement at the top. This one's. "I know what an NDA is, Harold." I cut him off before he could finish. I signed it. Turned out that was the last page. I got up and walked the clipboard back to the front desk. "No need," Stephanie said, looking up with a small smile. "I'll let the doctor know you're ready to go up." I sat back down and wasn't really sure what to do while I waited, so I pulled out my phone and started looking up the company I had just signed an NDA and consent forms for. According to their website, Dynamic Medical Machines, or DMM, was one of the leading companies in biomedical device design. Before I could even click on one of the links, a loud ding sounded and I looked up. The nearest elevator had opened and an older woman in a white lab coat stepped out. She looked in our direction and gave us a big, welcoming smile. "Good afternoon, Harold. Steph mentioned you were here with your friend." I turned to look at Harold. He just smiled sheepishly. "You, came up in conversation." The woman walked over and offered her hand. "I'm Dr. Brown. I'm the head of development here at DMM." I shook it. "Rick, I deliver pizzas." She laughed, warm and genuine, which caught me off guard considering how professional and serious she looked. "No need to tell us what you do for a living. Everyone coming through our screening process usually isn't here because they're wildly successful." I must have looked nervous because Harold jumped in. "You'll be fine, Rick. I'll be down here waiting." "Doctor," Brown gestured toward the open elevator she had just come out of. "If you join me, we'll head upstairs and start the screening process." "Good luck," Harold called as I followed her inside. Once we were in the elevator, she pulled a badge from her pocket and waved it in front of a scanner just beneath the floor buttons. The red light turned green, and she pressed the button for the third floor. The door slid shut. I tried handing her the clipboard, but she shook her head. I don't handle paperwork. Someone else will take care of that upstairs. She was back to her serious expression, standing silently while the elevator slowly made its way up. I tried to cut through the tension. So what exactly do you do here? Without turning her head or taking her eyes off the elevator doors, she replied, I can't answer any questions until you've gone through intake. Intake? Processing? This place was either a cutting-edge medical facility or a really well-hidden horror movie set. When the doors opened, we stepped into another clean white room with a matching white desk. It looked like a smaller, more sterile version of a typical doctor's office waiting room. A second receptionist was seated behind the desk, already looking up as we approached. Richard? She asked. I nodded and handed her the clipboard. She reviewed each page carefully. Everything looks in order. You can go ahead and take him back, doctor. There was a loud buzz, and the only door in the room gave a loud click. Dr. Brown was already standing beside it, holding it open slightly as she motioned for me to follow. Can you tell me? I started, but she cut me off before I could finish. You'll go through processing and testing first. After that, we can talk, Dr. Brown said, opening a plain, unmarked door that led into what looked like a standard examination room. A single exam chair covered in fresh white paper sat in the middle of the room. Please, take a seat in the chair and wait for the phlebotomist. Once the testing is complete, we'll speak more. I nodded and sat down. As soon as I did, she closed the door behind me. A few minutes passed before a man in nurse's scrubs entered, carrying a tray of pre-sealed syringes. Without much small talk, he drew 3 vials of blood. He was polite, but definitely not chatty. Once he finished, he handed me a small plastic cup and led me to a nearby bathroom. Drug test? I asked an eyebrow. He nodded. Yeah, but don't worry, it's just for compatibility. Compatibility? I echoed. He paused, clearly regretting his words. I shouldn't have said anything. Just leave the sample in the marked container on top of the toilet when you're done, then head back to the exam room. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me. Even the restroom was the same stark, sterile white as every other room I'd seen so far. I had no idea how they managed to keep it all so spotless. I filled the cup, set it in the designated basket, and left the bathroom. When I returned, I was momentarily blocked from re-entering the exam room by a large machine on a rolling cart. Oh, sorry about that. A short Asian man appeared from the side and quickly moved the cart out of the way so I could get back in. As I sat back down, I finally got a better look at what he was doing. He was holding what looked like a rubber swimming cap wired with dozens of electrodes, each connected to the machine. He noticed me eyeing it and chuckled. I'm Dr. Zhao? This cap is going to read the electrical signals from your brain while you answer some questions. Like a lie detector? I asked. He smiled. It's a little more complex than that, but essentially, yes. Now, if you don't mind. He held out the cap. I sighed and pulled it over my head, thankful I kept my hair short. I had no idea how Harold managed to get this tight rubber cap on with that wild hippie hair of his. Once the cap was snugly fitted onto my head, Dr. Joe flipped a couple of switches on the machine. The device gave off a low, steady hum, and he adjusted the monitor so that it faced away from me. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, he said, picking up a clipboard from the cart. I need you to answer them as truthfully as possible. Understood? I guess, I said. Can I ask what this is all for? Not unless you want to violate the NDA you just signed. He glanced down at the clipboard. Let's begin. Please state your full name. Richard Pinsky. I didn't hear any beeps or noises aside from the faint hum of the machine. Dr. Zhao stared at the monitor for a few seconds, then returned his attention to the clipboard. All right. Do you love your parents? That one threw me off a little. I guess, I said after a moment. He glanced at the screen again, then asked the next question. Do you find children sexually attractive? My whole body tensed. What the fuck kind of question is that? I snapped. What kind of question are any of these? I'm done. I reached up to pull the cap off, but his hand gently caught mine before I could. Look, he said calmly, I know how strange these questions sound, but we have to filter out any problematic individuals before entering trials. You can understand why we wouldn't want someone like a child molester involved in sensitive research, right? I paused, unsettled, but I kind of got it. It made a twisted sort of sense in the context of medical testing. He repeated the question, now, do you find children sexually attractive? No, I said firmly, my voice low. He checked the screen again. Good. Next question. If a train leaves Los Angeles traveling east at 50 miles per hour and another train leaves Williamsburg traveling west at 60 miles per hour, how long will they be on a collision course before the heat death of the universe? I blinked. What? It was complete nonsense. That wasn't even a question, just some surreal riddle with physics and existential dread mashed together. Dr. Zhou looked at the screen one last time. Okay, I've got what I need. He set the clipboard back on the cart and gently removed the cap from my head. That's it? I asked. I've got what I needed, he repeated. Dr. Brown should be with you shortly. Without another word, he practically bolted. He opened the door, wheeled the machine and cart out in one swift motion, and didn't even bother disconnecting the cap's wires, despite how carefully he'd hooked everything up just minutes before. Dr. Brown came in about 10 minutes later. Her serious expression had completely vanished, replaced by a wide, enthusiastic smile. Mr. Pinsky, she said cheerfully, I just spoke with Dr. Zhao and reviewed the results of your scan, and it looks like you have exactly what we're looking for. I blinked, still trying to process everything. What you're looking for? Your mind, she said, tapping her temple. More specifically, your brain. You're a perfect fit for our newest implant trials. That sounded good, I guess, but something caught in the back of my mind. Wait, implant? She let out a patient sigh. Yes, the trial does involve a surgical procedure, but you'll be well compensated. Our standard package includes an upfront payment of $4,000 followed by $1,500 a month for the duration of your participation. $4,000. $4,000. This couldn't be real. Not only could I finally pay for my car repairs, I wouldn't even need to keep delivering pizzas as long as this trial lasted. Is Harold part of this trial too? I asked. He is, she replied. But I must ask that you not discuss any part of the trial with him, as I'm sure you remember. Violates the NDA. Yeah, I know. I cut her off with a small grin. Considering how many times she'd shut me down with that line earlier, I figured I was due for one interruption of my own. She actually laughed. Fair enough. I probably deserve that, but I need you to take this seriously. We're developing a device that, if successful, will allow thoughts to be transmitted between two different people. We're calling it Project Telepathy. I stared at her. Thought transfer? A literal mind-reading implant? This was crazy. A mysterious medical company was offering me thousands of dollars to put some device in my head and be part of a telepathy experiment. But on the other hand, $4,000. That was enough to get my car fixed, pay off a chunk of my credit card debt, maybe even afford a birthday gift for my little brother, something I hadn't been able to do in years. Crazy sci-fi experiment. $4,000. When would I get paid? I asked. Her expression turned serious again, all warmth gone. As soon as you sign the documents authorizing the surgery. I hesitated. Just for a minute. I thought about the overdue bills, the car shop, the stack of ignored letters from creditors. I thought about my brother's birthday. I looked up at her. Where do I sign? What could possibly go wrong? Turns out, a lot. A few signatures later, a quick trip to the bank to verify that the check was real, and just like that, I was $4,000 richer. Holy shit, I muttered for the third time as I stared at the balance on my phone sitting on my couch in a kind of dazed disbelief. "Told you it was legit, man," Harold said, smugly puffing on the joint he'd lit once we got back to my place. Between the spotless building, the army of staff in lab coats, and now this actual non-bouncing $4,000 check, it was pretty clear the company was the real deal. But of course, being legit also meant they were seriously going to implant something into my head. "You're in the telepathy project too?" I asked. Harold simply tapped the back of his neck, right where the skull meets the spine. "No need to worry, man. It's not actual brain surgery. The implant's only about the size of a quarter, with a few tiny wires. They place it just under the cerebellum." Cerebellum? When did the high school dropout start dropping science terms? Harold's smile faltered for a second, just a flicker, but then he forced it back. Guess I actually paid attention for once. That slip threw me off a little. It wasn't like Harold to get rattled by a little jab, not one that mild. Maybe now that he wasn't broke all the time, he had more self-respect. Or maybe I was just being kind of a dick. Either way, I brushed it off. In hindsight, that quick flash of discomfort should have told me something was off. But sometimes I'm an idiot, and I let it go. The conversation fizzled out not long after that. After hanging out for another hour or two, Harold eventually left, along with most of the joint, but leaving me about a gram of some seriously good weed. It was 4 in the afternoon. I was exhausted from waking up early and going through all the testing, but it was too late for a nap. The car shop was thrilled when I called to say I could finally pay and get the repairs started. I paid off my long overdue cell phone bill and even managed to put something toward my credit card, the first payment in 6 months. The rest of the night was quiet. I stayed in, smoked a little, and caught up on episodes of whatever Marvel Netflix show I'd fallen behind on. I tried to sneak in a couple hours of sleep, but was rudely jolted awake by a phone call at 7 a.m. "Hello?" I answered groggily, still halfway in a dream. "Hello, Mr. Pinsky. I'm calling from Dynamic Medical Machines." I sat up straight, suddenly wide awake despite barely 5 hours of sleep. "Oh, hi. What's going on? I'm calling to schedule your surgery." "That's fast. You guys don't waste any time." The woman on the other end laughed politely. "Time is money, Richard. We're a company after all. We move quickly. We have a slot available later this week and one this afternoon if you're not busy." Today, that felt a little sudden. Why the rush? And then it hit me. Maybe I was the only candidate who'd made it through screening. Maybe I had something rare, something they were actively looking for, and they didn't want to waste time now that they finally found it. For once in my life, it actually felt kind of nice to be the thing someone needed. "Mr. Pinsky, are you still there?" "Yeah, sorry," I said. "How long does the surgery take?" "We can't guarantee exact recovery time, but typically it's an outpatient procedure. The implant doesn't require general anesthesia and doesn't go deep. You'll be in and out in a couple of hours, just a few stitches and some mild painkillers." I took a breath. "Let's do it later today." "I'll come by around 6 to pick you up if that's cool," Harold said as I stepped out of his car. "Sounds good." I shut the door and watched him drive off, the same beat-up car rolling away like a loyal stone skipping across a pond. Here I was again, less than 24 hours later, about to have something implanted in my head. This was either the start of a superhero origin story or the prologue to a horror movie. I honestly couldn't tell which. I stepped inside the familiar front lobby and walked straight to the desk. Stephanie was there again, headset on and tapping away at her computer. "Hey there, Mr. Pinsky. Big day already?" she said, pressing a button on her phone. "I'll let Dr. Brown know you're here." "No worries," I said as I turned to head toward the seating area. But I didn't even make it halfway. "No need, Rick." I turned to see Dr. Brown standing inside the elevator, its doors open behind her. This time, it was the one on the opposite side of the lobby from the elevator we'd used the day before. That was fast, I said as I stepped into the elevator. Any reason we're taking this one instead of the other? Dr. Brown pulled her badge from her coat and waved it in front of a small scanner. It beeped, the red light turning green, and she pressed the button labeled B. This is the only elevator that goes down to the basement level, she said. That's where the operating theater is. I glanced at her, a flicker of unease creeping in. The basement? That didn't sound good. She caught my expression and gave me the same warm, calming smile I remembered from yesterday. I know. Super creepy, right? A faceless corporate medical company doing basement surgeries on people they pay to experiment on. Sounds like the start of a horror film. But I promise, it's nothing like that. The basement's fully equipped with the best medical gear and personnel in the city. 3 recovery rooms, 2 certified surgeons, 4 nurses. Even the food's good. Comes straight from the upstairs cafeteria. Honestly, it's better than most hospitals. The elevator doors opened just as she finished her reassuring little monologue. I opened my eyes to a blinding white light. It was so bright I immediately squeezed them shut again, my head pulsing with pain. What the hell is going on? I was just in the... My voice trailed off. I couldn't remember. Everything felt hazy, disconnected. The back of my neck throbbed. Mr. Pinsky, glad to see you're awake. How are you feeling? I recognized the voice. Dr. Brown. I have a headache, I muttered. But before the words fully left my mouth, a nearby speaker echoed them back in a flat, robotic voice. I have a headache. What the hell? What the hell? The robotic voice repeated, mimicking my confusion. I see the implant is functioning, Dr. Brown said calmly. I tried to think before I spoke, but even that felt risky. I didn't need to hear my own stray thoughts voiced out loud by a machine. I focused and asked, why can't I remember anything? There were complications, she said, and I could almost picture the look on her face. Serious, maybe a little concerned. We experienced some unexpected feedback from the implant when we first connected it to your cerebellum. You lost consciousness. The medical team acted quickly. There was no damage, but memory loss was a possible side effect. I opened my eyes again. This time, they adjusted to the light more easily. The room came into view, a hospital room, clinical but comfortable. Dr. Brown was seated in a chair beside my bed, looking like she'd been there a while. Relaxed, waiting. What time is it? I asked, blinking rapidly, trying to get my eyes to adjust to the sharp overhead light. Dr. Brown gave a small laugh. Still a bit disoriented, I see. Totally normal, I promise. It's 15 past 7. I glanced around the bed, scanning both sides in a hurry. My phone? Where the hell was my phone? Harold was probably out in the waiting room wondering what had happened to me. Harold was notified about your condition, she said, reading my panic perfectly. He sends his regards. She reached into her coat pocket and handed me something. My phone. I snatched it from her and unlocked the screen. A text from Harold greeted me. Get some rest. How long until I can get out of here? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. Dr. Brown grabbed the clipboard hanging at the foot of the bed and gave it a quick glance. Toxicology reports are clean, but we'd like to keep you overnight for observation, just to be safe. This is fucking annoying. The robotic voice rang out again from a speaker in the room. I looked around and spotted it. Over in the corner, sitting on a rolling cart. The same machine Dr. Zhao had used during testing, minus the wired cap. Dr. Brown chuckled. I get it. Trust me. And just so you know, you won't be charged for any of the care here. Plus, I've been authorized to issue you a small bonus for the trouble. You might want to check your account. I opened my banking app. My eyes widened. An extra $1,000 had landed in my account since the last time I checked. A little less annoying. The speaker chimed again. Can we shut that thing off? I asked. Of course, she said, walking over to the cart. She flicked a switch and suddenly the quiet was deafening. I hadn't even noticed the low hum it had been making until it stopped. Now the room felt still, almost peaceful. "I've got some other things to attend to," she said, heading for the door. "The nurses are right outside. They're on call 24/7. Dinner's at 9. Try to rest if you can." Without waiting for a response, she stepped out, the door clicking shut behind her. Now that she was gone, I noticed it, the itch at the back of my neck. I reached back to scratch it, but the second my fingers brushed the area, a sharp pain flared up and I jerked my hand away. So here I was, in the basement of a sleek corporate medical building, recovering from unexpected surgery complications, with a device in my head that could broadcast my thoughts to a machine. And that machine, it had been on when I woke up. It was already on. I hadn't been conscious. I hadn't spoken. But it was still running. Why would it be on when I wasn't awake? The nurses were kind but kept their distance. Polite smiles, soft voices, but not a single name, and definitely no answers about the implant or the machine in the corner. Either they'd all signed NDA agreements like me, or they genuinely didn't know anything. Personally, I was leaning toward the second option. Then again, I was the idiot who volunteered to have a mysterious device implanted in his neck, so what the hell did I know? With nothing else to do, I finally pulled up the website for dynamic medical machines. Probably should have done that a couple days ago, but hey, I figured brain surgery and post-op memory loss bought me a pass. It was the usual corporate jargon. Forming the future of medical implants. Pioneering the next era of neurointerface technology. All that slick, meaningless PR fluff companies use when they don't want to tell you exactly what they're doing. Still, there was a page for the leadership team. And sure enough, there she was, Dr. Isabel Brown. Stern, professional photo, that same oddly warm smile. With nothing better to do, I dug a little deeper, looked her up beyond the company site. Turned out she was kind of a big deal. Her alma mater listed her by name in a write-up about the school's most accomplished alumni. She had multiple patents filed, and her name showed up in a few respected journals. In short, she was the same top-tier expert she claimed everyone else in the building was. But then something caught my eye on the third page of Google results, an old article from an archived issue of Fortean Times, dated 1979. Dr. Brown, Isabel, was only 15 at the time, and she wasn't the focus of the piece. The article was actually about her father, Dr. Patrick Brown. Apparently, he was famous too, but for very different reasons. The article described a testing facility he ran, one focused on locating real-life psychics. Dr. Patrick Brown believed wholeheartedly that there were people in the world with abilities that couldn't be explained, individuals who could sense things beyond human understanding. He was searching for people who could, say, correctly guess the shape on a card without ever seeing it, the kind of psychic phenomena most people dismissed. Oddly enough, the testing center he'd founded was still open, according to Google, but his name wasn't mentioned anywhere on their website. I got so caught up in reading that before I knew it, morning had arrived. A knock at the open door pulled me back to reality. "How are you feeling this morning, Mr. Pinsky?" Dr. Brown stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. I yawned. "Didn't sleep." "That's expected," she said. "You woke up around 6 yesterday evening. Any itching? Soreness?" "A little. Whatever the nurses gave me helped a lot. Truthfully, I was still sore, but painkillers are a hell of a drug." "Glad to hear it," she said, then eyes flicking down to her clipboard. "You feeling up for a little implant testing?" Of course, she didn't really care how I felt. She just wanted to see if her shiny new toy was working. "Doesn't Dr. Joe usually handle the testing?" I asked. She scoffed, brushing the question off with a wave of her hand. "I designed the damn receivers. I can run the machine just fine." Dr. Brown rolled the cart closer and turned the monitor around. For the first time, I actually saw the screen attached to the device that had been reading my thoughts. Honestly, it was kind of underwhelming. Just a standard Windows desktop. She clicked around, opening a few icons I didn't recognize, and soon a new window filled the screen. It looked a lot like an audio editing program. Waveforms, meters, sliders. "We're going to start with something simple. An association game," she said, her tone suddenly clinical. "I'll say a word, and you don't have to do anything except think your response. Don't speak. Just let the implant do the work. Sound good?" "Sure," I replied, already bracing myself for the unsettling voice. She tapped a few buttons on the machine. Some lights blinked on, and the soft hum returned, somehow familiar now. Then she began. "Father. Asshole. My father is an asshole." "Asshole," the computerized voice repeated from the speaker, flat and mechanical. Yep, still deeply unnerving hearing my inner thoughts spoken aloud by a machine. But what disturbed me more was how it decided what to say. How did it pull that word out of the swirl in my head? "Job," she said next. "I'm a pizza delivery driver. My job doesn't matter." "Pointless," said the speaker. I blinked. I didn't think that word. At least I didn't know I did. Thinking about thoughts made me loop in circles. Circles, thoughts, loops, shapes, spirals. Suddenly, a burst of light filled my vision. A loud, high-pitched noise rang in my ears, and then Dr. Brown's face was right in front of mine, holding a pen light, shining it in my eyes. "There you are," she said, "back in the land of the living." "I was dead?" I mumbled, still dazed. "No, nothing like that. Follow the light for me, please." I did my best, tracking the beam as she moved it side to side. Apparently satisfied, she tucked the pen light back into her coat pocket. There was feedback again. The implant started sending signals back into your cerebellum. "It stopped now, but we're done with testing for today." She returned to the machine, flipped a few switches, pressed a couple buttons. The hum stopped. But something about it felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a gap, something I wasn't seeing, something that wasn't adding up. "As for your condition," Dr. Brown continued, "given these ongoing complications, I'm recommending that you remain here until we sort out what's happening." "Wait, keep me here?" "If it's okay," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'd really rather go home. I think being in my own space might help." She looked at me for a moment. Whatever warmth had been on her face earlier was gone. Her expression shifted to the same cold, stern look she wore the day we met in that elevator. "I'm very sorry to do this, Richard," she said. "But as the attending physician, I'm enforcing the terms of the medical contract you signed. The technical term is medical quarantine." I just stared at her. She was keeping me here, against my will. As soon as Dr. Brown left the room, I reached for my phone. I figured if I didn't make a fuss about the whole medical quarantine thing, maybe I could quietly call the police and get the hell out of here. No luck, of course. Sometime between Dr. Brown walking in and walking out, they must have killed the Wi-Fi. And naturally, down in the basement, I wasn't getting any signal either. No bars, no data, no contact with the outside world. What the fuck had I gotten myself into? I tried to get answers from the nurse who came in later, asked her about the feedback issue Dr. Brown mentioned. But just like before, she was polite, almost too polite, and completely silent when it came to anything resembling real information. And then there were the side effects. Beyond the persistent soreness and the occasional stabbing pain at the implant site, I started getting hit with bouts of dizziness and that same strange loop thinking I'd experienced during the test. The third time it happened, I came back to myself to find the TV across the room blaring Fox Business. Not only was I losing time, I was apparently doing things during it. What disturbed me most wasn't the memory loss. It was the question that came after. Why the hell was I watching Fox Business? But it wasn't really a question. It was more like a compulsion, a pressure building in my head, a craving, a weird, inexplicable need for stimulation, any kind. Even if it was just the droning voice of some anchor talking about stock performance and market trends. "Hey," a voice said from the doorway. I looked up to see Dr. Zhao standing there. I'm here to check on the implant site, he said. Is now a good time? I nodded. Not doing much else, unless you count watching green and red arrows all day. Dr. Zhou chuckled. Glad to see you've still got a sense of humor. He stepped into the room, pulling out a small flashlight, the same kind Dr. Brown had used. I turned my head, wincing slightly at the tightness in my neck. He leaned in close, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. A faint click as the flashlight came on. Looks good, he said. Incisions healing nicely. Let me just power up the receiver and check if the signal's coming through clean. He moved toward the machine on the cart. Rick? I corrected, watching him. He froze mid-step. My name is Rick. Dr. Zhao turned back toward me slowly, and for just a split second his face changed. Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of unease, recognition, regret. In that moment, everything inside me confirmed what I'd been afraid to admit. Something had gone wrong. The look vanished, and the man smiled. Of course, my mind's just a bit preoccupied today. He switched on the machine, and the familiar hum returned. He started asking the same strange questions he'd asked when he first put the cap on me during the initial tests. Are you sexually attracted to children? Before I could respond, the speaker on the cart cut in, blurting out, Of course not, you slant-eyed chink. I gasped out loud. I'm so sorry. Dr. Zhao didn't seem fazed. No worries, he said calmly. Then, raising his voice slightly as if speaking to someone else in the room, he added, I'm sure that was said only out of anger at what Rick is going through. Once again, I found myself wondering what the hell I'd gotten into. When this was all over, I was definitely asking for more money. Now, if a train leaves, I blinked. Dr. Zhao was no longer in the room. It had happened again. I'd lost another stretch of time. The TV was back on. This was getting ridiculous. I picked up my phone from the side table next to the bed. If I was going to keep losing time like this, I needed to start recording everything. Luckily, I already had a voice recording app on my phone, so I was ready for the next round of tests from either doctor. That opportunity came around 7 p.m., or was it the next day? Even with the phone clock, I couldn't tell if I'd been here one day or two. How are you feeling, Mr. Pinsky? It was Dr. Brown again. As discreetly as I could, I switched my phone screen from a game to the voice recorder and tapped the big red button. Feeling okay. Dr. Zhou says the swelling is going down. Good to hear. I understand you've been experiencing more feedback issues? She asked. She hadn't dropped the serious tone since she first told me I was stuck down here. If that's what Dr. Zhou said, then fine. My voice came out sharper than I intended, laced with more venom than I'd meant. It was getting harder and harder to hide my frustration and anger toward her. She ignored my tone and walked over to the machine. It was still running from when Dr. Zhou had last been in, so she just clicked a few buttons and began moving the mouse around. I'm going to run a couple more tests to see if... I cut her off. To see if the receiver is working. I get it. Just do what you need to do. I'm not going anywhere. She sighed, and for the first time, her expression softened a little. Rick, this isn't an ideal situation for any of us. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you please try not to be? I blinked. The hum from the machine was gone. Dr. Brown had disappeared from the room. Reality slammed back into focus, and I grabbed my phone from the table beside the bed. It was 7:47 p.m., and the voice recorder was still running. I stopped the recording at 43 minutes. Hopefully, this little trick would finally help me understand what the hell was going on. It did. It answered more questions than I was ready for. I skipped the first minute and hit play just as Dr. Brown's voice said, "Could you please try not to be so angry? We'll hopefully figure out what's happening soon." Then came a reply. Not my voice, but the computer-generated one from the cart speaker. When are you and the goddamn chink doctor going to figure out what the hell is going on? Daniel. Good, Dr. Brown responded on the recording. That means the new algorithm Dr. Zhao put together is working. Great, the voice continued. So now I can talk to you through a goddamn computer whenever I want. When are you going to figure out what the hell went wrong? And at the very least, give me a time frame for when I can take control of my new body. The computerized voice continued on the recording. I paid you an obscene amount of money for this procedure, and now I don't even have my own disease-riddled body to go back to. Daniel, stop calling me that. It's Mr. Warburton to you. That name triggered something in my memory, but I couldn't quite place it. Still, I let the recording play on. Mr. Warburton, we are doing everything in our power to figure out what's happening, Dr. Brown said calmly. The device is functioning exactly to its specifications, so we're confident the issue lies with Richard himself, not with the hardware. That should be reassuring, since it means the device, that is you, isn't being damaged in the process. Oh, great. So I'm not going to die for the second time anytime soon, the voice snapped. You told me this procedure had already been successfully done with your own son, Dr. Brown. Was that a lie too? Of course not, she replied firmly. My son was the one who brought Richard in for this. So don't slander his name when he's not here to defend himself. You wouldn't even be able to speak through this computer if it weren't for him. I paused the recording, stunned. Dr. Brown's own son had already undergone the procedure, this horrifying operation that could place someone's consciousness into another person's body. Worse, it sounded like her son had recruited me for Daniel. Harold had recruited me. I'd had my suspicions, but this crushed any lingering hope I had that help would come from outside. My best friend was gone, replaced by Dr. Brown's son. He'd lied to me for months, all to set me up as a vessel for Daniel Warburton. I had to think, was there any way to help Harold, assuming there was anything left of him? This recording might be my only clue. So I hit play again. The computerized voice grew more agitated, its pitch rising slightly. You also said I'd have access to his memories. You called it the whole kit and caboodle, but I have nothing, no access whatsoever. I can't even tell what time it is unless you start up the machine. Explain to me how this existential nightmare is the second life you promised me. Dr. Brown's tone remained steady. Mr. Warburton, you signed the release for the procedure. The risks were all clearly outlined. You knew complications were possible. Each body is unique. Its chemistry, its brain. Our early tests showed that Richard was particularly susceptible to the implant. Clearly, there was something we missed during screening. With the rushed timeline for your case, that's entirely possible. The voice from the speaker rose to a shout, loud and laced with fury. You're the genius doctor who invented this. I'm sorry my cancer rushed your timeline, but I paid you to do your job and paid extra to have it done fast. Just fix it. I need to get back to work. Something on the TV caught my eye, and I paused the recording. A photo of an old, frail-looking man appeared on the screen, accompanied by a bright red breaking news banner. The head of a major investment banking firm had just died. It made sense that a business network was covering it. He was a giant in the world of finance. They called him a visionary, praising his early investments in cell phones and mobile gaming, and his role in backing numerous tech companies. The report also mentioned a series of aggressive investments he'd made after being diagnosed with an untreatable form of cancer, specifically his heavy funding of biomedical research. One name stood out, a startup in Phoenix called Dynamic Medical Machines. Daniel Warburton, tech investment giant, dead at 83, the Fox News anchor said solemnly into the camera. I turned off the TV. I didn't need to keep staring at the face of the man I'd been sold to like a piece of equipment. I glanced back down at my phone. Still no signal, no internet, no way to call for help. My best friend wasn't looking for me because he didn't exist anymore. My family hadn't cared enough to notice I was gone. And now I had the mind of one of the 1% trapped in my skull trying to take over, with a team of mad scientists scrambling to figure out why their brain transfer experiment wasn't working. What I did have, though, was a recording and my fractured mind. Wait, I opened the recording app again, rewinding about a minute. I needed to double check something Daniel had said. I have no access whatsoever. I can't even keep track of what time it is outside of these conversations when you decide to fire up the machine. The blackouts I'd been experiencing, they weren't just lapses in my memory. Daniel couldn't remember them either. Someone was clearly active during those blackouts, but neither of us had any memory of it. I couldn't explain it. Daniel knew more about the tech than I did, yet even he was lost. He only became aware when they powered up the machine. He only knew time existed when the machine was on. I looked over at the machine in the corner. Right now, it was off. Then I looked back at the phone in my hand. I had a decision to make. I didn't know when Dr. Zhao, Dr. Brown, or any of the nurses might walk through that door. If they caught wind of this recording, they'd probably take my phone and the charger, and that would be the end of it. But if I turned on the machine now, I might have a chance, a slim one. I could try to talk to Daniel directly, try to use what I knew, what I just discovered. But time would be short, and I didn't know what I could say that would convince him to use his immense resources to help me escape this place. Still, desperation was my only option now. So the real question I had to ask myself was, can you threaten the ghost with death? A knock at the door. Hey buddy, how's it going? Harold, or at least it looked like Harold. His voice, his body, his hair, even that easy, familiar smile. But I had to remind myself, it wasn't really Harold in there. Could be better, honestly. I keep blacking out and no one seems to know what the hell is going on. I paused, an idea suddenly forming. I don't think Dr. Ross Brown actually knows what she's doing. I kept my eyes on him as I said her name. There it was, just a flicker of irritation before the smile returned. If I hadn't been watching so closely, I might have missed it. But that was it. The last tiny shred of hope that any part of Harold was still in there died in that moment. I'm sure they're doing everything they can, he said smoothly. She was always super nice when I was here. If something's wrong, I'm sure they'll figure it out soon. That was Dr. Brown's son talking, not Harold. Now that I knew the truth, every word from his mouth was a slow kind of torture. Every moment he mimicked my friend, digging through his memories to sell the illusion. Every second he wore Harold's skin like a costume. Do you think they've got cameras in here? I asked casually. Huh? This room? Think they've planted cameras or mics anywhere? He glanced around, pretending to take in the space, doing a convincing impression of someone unfamiliar with the layout. I don't see any, but I'd be surprised if this place wasn't wired to the ceiling. Why? I thought quickly. I needed him close enough to whisper something a camera couldn't catch. I was just wondering about, I mimed taking a hit off a joint. He laughed. Dude, they drug tested you. They probably know more about your blood than you do. Damn. Yeah, probably. I just need to ask something, and I don't want the cameras picking it up. He sighed. All right, man, but I don't get why you're being so paranoid. He stepped up to the bed, leaning in so I could whisper. I turned my head toward him, shielding my mouth with my hand. Don't let her know, but I know who you are. When I pull back, you're going to make up some excuse to leave. And if you say anything to your mother or anyone else about what I just told you, I swear the moment I get a chance, I'll rip this implant out of my neck. Your mom's pet project will lose all its funding. Got it? I pulled my mouth away from his ear and looked at him. He turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of those eyes, cold, focused, and empty. That wasn't Harold. Not really. I didn't know if he'd take my threat seriously, didn't know if I could actually follow through on it. But I had to hope he believed I could. Sure, dude, he said in Harold's voice. But now that I knew the truth, I could see it clearly. Behind those familiar eyes, there was nothing of my friend. The voice, the expressions, the casual mannerisms, they were just echoes, memories in motion, but not Harold. So yeah, I said, trying to sound casual, I was hoping you could grab that stuff from my apartment. Sound cool, man? Sure, man, sure. Anything else I should grab while I'm there? I thought for a moment. Maybe a pair of pants? They never gave back the ones I came in with, and honestly, it's getting a little drafty. He paused, then nodded. Of course. Should I go now? Yeah, I said, giving him a small smile. It's getting weird not having pants on in front of people. Harold left, but I had to remind myself again, that wasn't really Harold. Somehow, I'd managed to get Dr. Brown's son to listen to me. For now. And I had to figure out what to do with that window of opportunity. Maybe Daniel could help. My eyes drifted to the machine in the corner of the room. But how was I supposed to talk to Daniel without slipping into one of those blackouts? I tried to piece together everything I could remember about the tests. They would fiddle with something on the computer, power up the receiver, and then blackout. Total memory loss. Except, I didn't black out every single time. In the early tests, when the cap was first placed on my head, the speaker had started blurting things out, vague impressions of my thoughts. Not word for word, but close enough. Could that have been Daniel? Or at least some fragment of him that was aware and able to speak? Just yesterday, if it even was yesterday, I was thinking about how to spend my money, and now I was trying to figure out how to operate a mind-reading machine. Or maybe it was 2 days ago. Time was blurring together, no sunlight, random blackouts. It was nearly impossible to keep track. I reached for my phone on the side table. 10:07 p.m. Dinner had already been delivered, and unless I called the nurses for something, they had no reason to check in. Dr. Brown never showed up past 7 p.m., and I'd only seen Dr. Zhou once since I'd arrived. This might be my only shot. Screw it. I pushed myself out of bed and tried to stand. A wave of dizziness hit me immediately as the blood rushed from my head. I had to clutch the edge of the bed just to keep from falling. After a few unsteady seconds, the spinning slowed, and I managed to hold myself upright. Another minute, and I was standing on my own. The machine sat in the corner of the room, humming silently like it always did in my nightmares. I'd seen Dr. Brown turn it on more than once, so I flipped the switches I remembered her using. The screen flickered to life, and the machine began that familiar low hum. On the monitor, a handful of programs appeared. Unfortunately, I had no idea which one she used to speak with Daniel. I didn't have the luxury of certainty, so I went with trial and error. I opened the first program on the list, and for once, luck was on my side. The interface looked like some kind of audio control software. Not that I knew what any of it did. I clicked around randomly, poking through drop-down menus until I saw a section labeled Recently Opened. There were 2 files listed. One was just a jumble of letters and numbers. But the other? Daniel, of course, obvious. Convenient, maybe too convenient, but I wasn't going to question it. I opened the file. Instantly, the screen came alive. Audio lines began to pulse and shift, and the hum of the machine grew louder. Then the speaker crackled. "Is that you again, Dr. Brown?" He was there. The voice of the man who had paid a fortune to steal my life, my body, my future. The one they said was dead. Speaking to me now from inside this machine. But neither of us had gotten what we wanted. Both of us were stuck down here. Prisoners of a failed experiment no one could figure out. We were both in danger, both screwed unless something changed. I stepped closer. "Mr. Warburton, we have a lot to talk about." "Who is this? I swear if this is that goddamn Chi, I'm not Dr. Zhou." I cut him off, my voice firm. "My name is Richard Pinsky." There was a pause. Who? Of course. Why would he even remember my name? To him, I was just raw material, a vessel, a thing. "My name is Richard," I repeated more sharply this time. "Dr. Brown mentioned me in your earlier conversations." Still no reply. I sighed. I'm the meat suit you pay Dr. Roberts a ridiculous amount of money for. Ah, yes, he said, his tone suddenly polite. What can I do for you? That threw me. This wasn't the furious, entitled voice I'd heard on the recording, the man who barked orders and tantrumed at every setback. Now he sounded almost friendly. Mr. Warburton, I won't sugarcoat it. We're both in deep trouble. The implant's malfunctioning, and I've been having blackouts, long ones. Look, child, he said coolly, I don't care what's going on with you. You obviously went through quite a bit of trouble to figure out how to turn this machine on and talk to me. So tell me, why should I listen to you? There it was, the real Warburton, direct, dismissive, calculating. What could I possibly say to convince someone like him to help me? A titan of industry, a tech mogul who'd shaped markets and dominated entire sectors, a man who had spent a fortune cheating death and had, by all legal definitions, already died. Except he wasn't really dead, was he? If he wanted to keep control of his empire, there had to be some legal workaround, some way that the ownership, the power had to transfer to me, the body he now inhabited. And that gave me an idea, a long shot, a desperate bluff. I know about the will, I said. Silence. Shit. It hadn't worked. I'd overplayed my hand. My last shot at freedom, at any leverage at all, was gone. When Dr. Brown or Dr. Zhao came back, they'd talk to him. They'd know what I'd done. I'd be restrained, locked down, helpless. I'd blown it. Then the speaker came back to life. You've got guts, kid, Warburton said. And if I still had a pair, you'd have me buy them. But the will? That means nothing once they fix the implant. He was listening. Maybe. Just maybe. If I gave him more reason to believe he wasn't getting out of this place in one piece, he'd use the full weight of his money and legal team to get me out of here. To get us out of here. And I had something I was pretty sure would convince him. You're not stupid, Daniel, I said. The implant is clearly faulty. If it were working like it's supposed to, you'd already be in control of my body, and I wouldn't even be aware anything was happening. I have no idea how long I've been down here because of how often I'm blacking out, and it's getting worse. But Dr. Brown, I cut him off. Dr. Brown and Dr. Zhao are just two doctors. If we got out of here, we could have a whole team looking into what's going wrong. The implant is defective, and you have to ask yourself, do you really want to take the risk that it fails completely and kills both of us? There was a long silence. I'd taken a gamble, speaking that bluntly, leaning hard into the threat. I could only hope he bought it, or at least believed the blackouts were real, even if I had exaggerated a bit. Unfortunately, you're probably right, he finally said. Do you have a phone? I do, I said, but they've tampered with it. I can't get a signal out. Still, I think I know someone who might be able to help. I was surprised I managed to fall asleep considering how tense I felt. But I got a couple hours of decent rest, which turned out to be a good thing, because I needed the clarity when the knock came at the door. It was Harold, or more accurately, it was Dr. Brown's son in Harold's body. He walked in, tossed a pair of my jeans onto the bed, and looked at me with none of Harold's warmth. You're an idiot, he said flatly, with zero attempt to pretend. I blinked. Excuse me? But you're a lucky idiot. My mom doesn't get to the lab for another hour, and Dr. Zhao's asleep in his office. If I wasn't covering the cameras half the time, they would have seen you talking to Daniel. I glanced down at the jeans. Why are you helping me? Why'd you listen when I told you I knew who you really were? He let out a sigh, nothing like Harold's easy exhale. It was tired, resigned, a different person entirely. I heard the anger in your voice, he said. And my mom, she took your best friend away from you. He paused, then looked at me seriously. Do you know what the implant actually does? As I started pulling on the jeans, I replied, besides pulling some Invasion of the Body Snatchers crap? He laughed, and it was wrong. It sounded like Harold's laugh, looked like Harold's smile, but now I knew it was just muscle memory. I hated how familiar it felt. It holds a person's consciousness, he explained. Or maybe it's a copy. I'm not totally sure. That's not a detail I like to dwell on. But either way, it implants someone into a body, connects them into the brain. And what's already in there, it doesn't go away. I still have access to Harold's memories, everything he knew. If you're trying to make me feel sympathetic, it's not working, I cut in. That's not the point, he replied calmly. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just want you to understand that I know how Harold felt about you, what he thought of you. I have his memories, all the good ones. I know how much your friendship meant to him. You don't deserve this, and neither did he. He paused, then added, and you don't need to worry about calling Daniel's lawyers. I already did. I stopped mid-motion, pants halfway on. Wait, what? I called them already. They should be here any minute. So you might want to finish putting those on, he said, nodding toward my pants. I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, probably best not to meet my new legal team without pants. The lawyers arrived about 30 minutes later, along with 2 police officers. Dr. Zhao didn't put up much of a fight once they handed him the court injunction, signed by a federal judge demanding the release of one Richard Pinsky. Without Dr. Brown present to run interference, everyone else fell in line. The looming threat of lawsuits and possible kidnapping charges did the rest. Now I'm in a real hospital. The nurses here are kind, and they answer my questions with an honesty that feels almost surreal. The doctors are still scratching their heads over the implant in my neck, but they're hopeful. Daniel's money, now technically my money, is flying in specialists from all over the country to take a look. It helps when you're rich enough to turn a hospital room into a premium suite. I told them everything I knew. They didn't believe me at first, but the audio recording on my phone made them pause. Add in a few court depositions from employees at Dynamic Medical Machines, and their skepticism started to crack. I still have blackouts. They're not getting worse. But they're not getting better either. Daniel is still with me. I was right about the will. Most of his fortune was left to me. A few distant relatives tried to make noise about it, but Daniel, speaking through the machine I insisted stay in the room, assured me the will was airtight, ironclad. And unfortunately for him, he's still legally dead. Not that he seems to mind. These days, he's more interested in managing his wealth and watching Fox News. Tim, Dr. Brown's son, has visited a few times. I don't hold much against him anymore. It's hard to blame someone for what their mother did to them, implanting him into my best friend against his will. Yeah, sure. He's the one who recruited me in the first place, who helped get me into this whole mess. But it's hard to stay angry. He volunteered to have the implant removed, but the doctors took one look at his scan and said it would kill him. So here I am now, lying in a hospital bed, writing all this down. They're bringing me in for some kind of surgery tomorrow. Not sure if it's the same kind of procedure that would have killed Tim. Hard to focus sometimes. But I trust these doctors. They're the ones without implants in their heads. Without the heads. Implants without heads, without implants, without heads.